to hide the fact that North Korean soldiers were fighting in Ukraine or fighting in Russia in the Kursk Oblast on behalf of Russia against Ukrainian forces.
Aim to boost morale and justify the deployment, as the partnership between Moscow and Pyongyang grows stronger under the Mutual Defense Pact signed last year.
55 North Korean tanks, backed by drones and artillery, stormed into Ukraine in August 2025. A 4-kilometer column of armored steel looked unstoppable, until it entered 3 square kilometers of farmland prepared with more mines, traps, and hidden firepower than anyone expected. Within minutes, that near-invincible assault was transformed into smoke, wreckage, and chaos. How did Ukraine turn overwhelming force into a crushing defeat without committing its entire front line?
To Russian territory last year, officials say thousands of those North Korean fighters were either killed or wounded.
And why did none of those tanks ever make it home? Stay with this, because what you're about to see redefines modern battlefield strategy. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. How do you stop a 4-kilometer armored column rolling forward with drones overhead, artillery behind it, and 55 war machines spread across the road and fields? You can't throw an equal number of tanks at it without risking disaster. You can't wait until it hits your defensive line, or you'll be smashed open by concentrated fire. And yet, in the middle of Ukraine, this is exactly the challenge that confronted defenders as the North Korean armored spear pushed westward. The scene was striking. Main battle tanks in the lead, their turrets swinging back and forth as if searching for targets, followed by armored personnel carriers packed with infantry and trucks full of supplies rumbling close behind. Metal caterpillar tracks chewed up the road, dust plumes hung in the air, and reconnaissance drones circled overhead, broadcasting a wide-angle picture of the formation. From a distance, it looked unstoppable, a blunt instrument meant to force its way across Ukrainian terrain by sheer tonnage and momentum. High above, in the night sky, Ukrainian drones hovered quiet and unblinking, feeding live video into underground bunkers. Infrared scopes showed the glowing silhouettes of engines moving like a pack of predators, one behind the other, in tight formation. Ukrainian reconnaissance teams scattered in forests and shallow trenches observed in silence. They knew one trigger pulled too early would give away their hand, and one false move against such massed armor could end in certain destruction. To understand the danger, you have to see what this assault really represented. Those tanks were intended to smash open a corridor wide enough for Russian artillery batteries to pour shell after shell into Ukrainian ground forces.
Admitted for the first time it had deployed soldiers to the conflict. It said it helped, in its words, to liberate the Russian region of Kursk.
The armor wasn't moving in isolation. It was the hammer designed to pry open a gap, while waves of explosive firepower waited to surge through. A break in the defensive line here didn't just mean lost equipment. It meant ceding the Colmus River corridor, a narrow artery that once breached could carry enemy supply wagons, mobile artillery, and reinforcements straight into the Ukrainian rear. In military terms, losing this space conceded leverage for miles around. That was the gamble. Meeting armor with armor in head-on combat across this corridor could have led to catastrophic Ukrainian losses. The frontline defenders could not simply stack tanks and infantry against an opponent with greater mass supported by barrages of rocket artillery from the rear. Every commander on the ground understood grenade launchers and anti-tank missiles might kill a few lead vehicles, but doing so outright would expose crews to sudden counterfire. The psychological weight of 55 armored war machines rolling forward was in itself designed to crush defenders into retreat. But the Colmus corridor carried its own secrets. It wasn't just a strip of land between two muddy riverbanks. It narrowed into a predictable channel of movement, a natural funnel for heavy machinery.
Yang is sending up to 30,000 more troops to bolster Russian forces along the front lines. North Korea initially sent some 11,000 troops.
Ukrainian engineers had studied that terrain long before the attack. They mapped where armor would have to move, where bridges limited maneuver, where farmland fields turned soft under heavy rain. Over 2 weeks, as artillery thunder rumbled far to the east and steel plates clanged at repair yards, Another kind of preparation was unfolding in near silence.
With some reports suggesting a further 30,000 troops will be sent.
President Putin said Russia would never forget the North Koreans who lost their lives paying tribute to what he called their heroism.
The soldiers laying this groundwork weren't expecting to fight the enemy conventionally. They weren't preparing to meet machine with machine at the choke point. Instead, they built something that required more patience than firepower, a layered defense that waited for the column to commit itself fully. For them, the numbers were not the test. The real test was whether preparation could break an armored spear designed to decide the battle in a single push. So as 55 North Korean tanks kept moving west, the unanswered question was not just where they were heading, but whether the ground beneath them had already decided their fate before the first shot was fired. Ukraine didn't meet steel with steel. They chose instead to make the battlefield itself the weapon. For 2 weeks, Ukrainian engineers worked under cover of darkness, hauling crates, digging ditches, and wiring detonators across a 3-square-kilometer patch of farmland.
To hide the fact that North Korean soldiers were fighting in Ukraine or fighting in Russia in the Kursk Oblast on behalf of Russia against Ukrainian forces.
He said their actions demonstrated the fighting spirit of the heroes during the operation to retake the area from Ukrainian forces.
By day, it looked like ordinary open fields, soil divided by thin lines of hedgerows and dirt paths. By night, it became a grid of hidden weapons waiting for heavy tracks to roll across them. Every inch of the ground was mapped and wired, a trap not for infantry, but designed specifically for armored machines, weighed down with thick plating and powerful engines. The core of this hidden system lay in the mines. Ukraine didn't rely on just one type. Crews buried TM-83 anti-tank mines, directional charges that could cripple a tank from the flank with jets of molten copper. Beside them, they laid TM-62 pressure mines designed to blow the tracks clean off a vehicle when thousands of pounds pressed down on their casings. To force the armor deeper into the trap, engineers used M200s, multi-purpose devices able to trigger on contact or by remote. The placement wasn't random. False corridors of seemingly clear ground guided the column inward, while overlapping layers of explosives narrowed movement until the armor was funneled precisely where planners wanted them.
And it's like they're sending the North Korean troops into a wood chipper. They're all coming back in caskets, but it doesn't seem to matter.
Technology turned those empty fields into a kind of mechanical ambush. Seismic triggers, linked by wired sensors, allowed Ukrainian operators to detect movement across the trap and even time which section to detonate. Commanders could wait, track the formation, and strike when the bulk of vehicles had committed themselves. In effect, what looked like level farmland had been restructured into an open-air kill zone, capable of destroying armor as reliably as any artillery barrage. And unlike a barrage, the first blast would seem to come from nowhere, leaving the enemy guessing whether they'd been attacked from above or below.
Aim to boost morale and justify the deployment, as the partnership between Moscow and Pyongyang grows stronger under the Mutual Defense Pact signed last year.
Instead, Moscow is tightening its wartime alliance with Pyongyang. Kim sending troops and artillery, Putin sending money and missile technology.
The North Korean column entered without slowing. Lead tanks drove forward, turrets traversing cautiously as crews kept their eyes on the horizon. They had no reason to suspect the ground itself was the weapon. It was the first T-90 that finally made the mistake. Its 46-ton hull pressed down on a pressure mine buried inches below the surface.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has thanked the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un for providing troops to help Russia fight Ukraine.
The explosion lifted the tank's left side clear from the soil, ripping off its track and hurling burning fuel across the road. Fire shot into the air, and the sudden halt forced the vehicles behind it to bunch together. Seconds later, centralized detonations cascaded through the formation. Mines triggered in waves beneath the crush of steel, and multiple tanks erupted almost at once. Within minutes, confusion broke out. Crews scrambled from hatches as fireballs rolled into thick black smoke. Ammunition began to cook off, hurling fragments across the column. Ukrainian artillery then opened up, striking the rear vehicles with shells that blocked retreat. Pinched from the front and the back, the armored spear no longer had space to maneuver. Drones overhead marked survivors. squadrons identifying individual vehicles for artillery and anti-tank teams to finish. One after another, the heaviest North Korean weapons fell silent in the kill zone they couldn't see.
Russia is providing missile technology to the North Koreans, and North Korea is now gaining battlefield experience.
The destruction of the column showed victory was not about raw firepower. It came from preparation, patience, and a refusal to fight on the enemy's terms. Timing, geography, and deliberate engineering turned overwhelming steel into twisted wreckage. Wars today drag in tanks, shells, and troops from across borders. Yet this battle proved ingenuity can outweigh quantity.
North Korea is publicly celebrating its role in the Ukraine war. Kim Jong-un has honored troops who fought alongside Russian forces, calling them heroes.
North Korea has already deployed more than 10,000 troops to Russia and also arms.
Corridors once meant for invasion became graveyards of armor. That raises a larger question for every viewer. In modern warfare, is strength measured by numbers on the battlefield or by the strategy that decides how those numbers are used?